Yeah, yeah.
This is a dedication. A little inspiration.
Yeah, yeah. One day, when the war is won, victory will be yours.
Victory's gonna be ours.
It'll be yours. One day, when the kingdom comes, it'll be yours. It'll be yours. It's a long way up.
It's a long way up.
And a short way down. Just don't let nobody come and take your crown.
Come take your crown.
Trying to make it through the system, but the doors are locked. The Most High got you covered. You're gonna rise to the top.
We're gonna rise, y'all.
This battle will bring victory. On with the greatest book in history. Jacob, you're great, it's no mystery.
Jacob, you're great.
Yeah, yeah. You know this battle has just begun.
Battle's just
Jacob,
begun.
you're hated by everyone.
All
But
nations
just
hate
remember
us.
you're the chosen son. Yeah, yeah.
This song is such an inspiration. We get the kingdom though there's much tribulation. Every day I send my prayers up. I even read where Yahweh said he'd raise us up. He gave Abraham the covenants. On the shoulders of Christ will rest the governments. The forces the nations gotta bring to me. The world is ours, our gates open continually. Praise Yahweh cause he gave us life, and sacrifice the reward as you could reign with Christ. Yeah, it's true, the Father made us sons to get a crown, then endure until the Savior comes. In the sight of God, no man is justified. To be approved, I read that gold must be tried. In the end, we're the greatest folks in history. Malachi sing to them about our victory.
This battle will bring victory.
We're gonna get the
On with the
victory.
greatest book in history.
Bible's the
Jacob, you're
greatest
great,
book.
it's no mystery. Yeah, yeah. You know this battle has just begun.
Battle has just
Jacob, you're
begun.
hated by everyone. But just remember you're the chosen son. Yeah, yeah.
We give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High God, Yahweh, for giving Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob the covenants, and for choosing our nation. We appreciate that. Hope the song inspired you. Yeah. Hey, shalom, everybody. How's everybody doing? Hopefully, everyone is doing well. I want to start off by giving all praise, all honor, all glory to the Most High God, Yahweh, the Supreme God, Sovereign of the universe. In the name of His only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai, who the world calls Jesus Christ. I want to say peace and blessings to everybody watching. I want to give a shout out to everybody that's watching on Maccabees TV. Guys, make sure that if you're watching the video, you like the video. Drop something in the comment section and, say shalom to your fellow Israelites. And that should trigger the algorithm. Shout out to everybody that's watching, of course, on our other YouTube channel, The Lines of Israel Class. Same thing with you guys. Make sure you guys like the video. Share the video. Drop a comment in the comment section. And, of course, a shout out to my brother Nasiah for allowing us to broadcast on this platform, the Side TV, so we can broadcast directly into people's homes. Last but not least, of course, I want to give a shout out to my Clubhouse family. For those of you guys that are in here, I know that for many of us, the Feast of Dedication falls during the middle of the week, which is a work week, and a lot of folks are, in transit from work, maybe having to get up to go to work tomorrow morning. So, sometimes some of these classes and stuff like that, when they fall during the week, during holy days, it's difficult for brothers and sisters to, fully partake in it. So hopefully they can watch it in the future. But again, for those that are listening on Clubhouse, you guys are welcome to listen in, but the link is at the top of the room. For the first, of course, everybody knows, for many of you guys, this is not your first Feast of Dedication, right? Many of you guys have been in the truth for a few years now, and so you already know what the Feast of Dedication is about. The link at the top of the screen or the top of the room on Clubhouse is because the first chapter of First Maccabees, I'm going to do a PowerPoint, and it's going to be a highly visual PowerPoint, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on some areas and some topics that lead up to the Feast of Dedication, because the Feast of Dedication part is pretty easy. We all know what it is, but I want to focus on that area of history that leads up to the Feast of Dedication, because there are some things that come up, right? There are some so-called inaccuracies that people say that are in the Bible. They're saying the Bible is not historically accurate when it comes to the Apocrypha, specifically the books of Maccabees and Esdras. So today we're dealing with Maccabees. So I'm going to spend some time in the book of First Maccabees chapter 1, and we're going to reconcile First Maccabees chapter 1 with history to see if it is indeed historically accurate. So we're going to spend some time there, all right? And then when we get to chapters 2 through 4, we pretty much can kind of read right through it because it's pretty much self-explanatory. So for you guys that are listening on Clubhouse, if you want to follow along and look at the slides, please feel free to hit the link at the top of the room at any time and come over to YouTube. If the audio for any reason acts up, again, you guys can click the link at the top of the room and come over to YouTube, and you guys shouldn't have any issues. So without further ado, brothers and sisters, I'm not going to hold you guys long because I too have to go to work tomorrow. And I normally don't do presentations this late in the evening. I'm on the East Coast time, so I normally don't do presentations this late in the evening. However, today's a special occasion, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the presentation late anyway. All right, so hopefully you guys can see the PowerPoint on your screen. All right, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. All right, so let's go ahead and let's blow the PowerPoint up. And let's get started. Salaki. And just so you guys know, I'm a little bit, slightly under the weather. I have a little bit of a cold or whatever, so you guys pardon me if you guys hear me clear my throat. Actually, right now in the process, as you guys already know how we do, I'm taking a lot of herbs and different things to try to, break this thing out before it gets worse. I really don't want to get, sick. Where I lived at, believe it or not, brothers and sisters, it actually snowed. So I'm not happy about that. It's not even the second week of December fully yet, and it already snowed here. Winter doesn't come until when? The 21st? So it's going to be a long winter, and I wasn't expecting it. I was praying that it didn't snow. It wasn't too much, like 3 inches, but that was 3 inches too much this early. So I'm a little bit under the weather, but nevertheless, we're going to go ahead and power through this presentation. So today's presentation is titled The Feast of Dedication. We want to kind of get into the history of what the Feast of Dedication is, why we observe it, but more importantly, like I said, today I'm going to actually touch on some of the history that leads up to the Feast of Dedication to plug in a few holes that people try to use against us as Israelites. Right, so let's go ahead and let's get started. Did you know that King Solomon kept or ordained the original Feast of Dedication? Did you guys know that? By the way, that's an icon of King Solomon from the Novgorod school in Russia. Okay, that's a black man. Look at his complexion compared to his crown, compared to the background, compared to the scroll that he's holding. You can clearly see that that's a black man with an afro. This is in Russia. The Novgorod school is in Russia, and he's black. Because, you know, the Christian apologists and others try to say that we Israelites try to make everybody black. No. The places where there was not a renaissance, like Russia, the icons remain in their true form to this day. Just as an aside note, not to get too off into history, but the Renaissance predominantly took place in Western Europe, which is why a lot of the artwork was whitewashed. But in the East, the further east that you go, the monasteries and the churches, there was no Renaissance. So the iconography remains the same. And you have icons that are almost 1600 years old, some of them, and they're black. So we don't have to make anything up. But with that being said, yes, King Solomon kept the original Feast of Dedication. Let's read about that. This is the book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 7. We're going to start from verse 1. Now, when Solomon had made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the house. Verse 2. And the priest could not enter into the house of the Lord because the glory of the Lord had filled the Lord's house. And when all the children of Israel saw how the fire came down and the glory of the Lord upon the house, they bowed themselves with their faces to the ground upon the pavement and worshiped and praised the Lord, saying, for he is good, and for his mercy endureth forever. Verse 4. Then the king and all the people offered sacrifices before the Lord. And King Solomon offered a sacrifice of 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the people dedicated the house of the Lord, house of God. And the priests waited on their offices, the Levites also with their instruments of music of the Lord, which David the king had made to praise the Lord, because his mercy endureth forever. When David praised by his ministry, and the priests sounded trumpets before them, and all Israel stood. Verse 7. Moreover, Solomon hallowed the middle of the court that was before the house of the Lord, for there he offered burnt offerings and the fat of peace offerings, because the brazen altar which Solomon had made was not able to receive the burnt offering and the meat offerings and the fat. Also, at the same time, Solomon kept the feast 7 days. 7 days. This is where the idea that we read about in the book of Maccabees, this is where they got it. They got it from Solomon. They were literally following Solomon's lead. So when people say, oh, the Maccabees ordained their own thing, they were doing their own thing. No. When they got control of the temple back from the heathen, they followed the pattern that Solomon created right here in the book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 7. Verse 8 again. Also at that time, Solomon kept the feast 7 days, and all Israel with him, a very great congregation, from the entering in of Hamath unto the river of Egypt. Verse number 9. And in the 8th day, they made a solemn assembly, for they kept the dedication of the altar 7 days, and the feast 7 days. Now, what I want you guys to notice is that that word dedication in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 9, when you look that word up in the Hebrew, it's the word Hanukkah. It's the word Hanukkah. So the original Hanukkah, or dedication of the temple, was initiated by King Solomon. All right. Real quick, I think I heard the other elder come in, so let me just bring him in real quick. All right. We're going to continue the lesson. All right. So let's move on to the next thing. Here's another dedication that we see later on in our history. It's the dedication of the wall. This is the book of Nehemiah, chapter 12, verse 27. And at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought the Levites out of all their places to bring them to Jerusalem to keep the dedication with gladness, both with thanksgiving and with singing and with cymbals and psalteries and with harps. This also is patterned on what Solomon did. So you see a continual pattern throughout our history, a continual pattern throughout the scriptures, a golden thread that threads everything together. When you see the dedication of the wall, it was based on what Solomon did. When you see the dedication of the temple and the Maccabees, it's based on what Solomon did. They were not instituting their own thing at all. When you look at this word dedication, Nehemiah chapter 12, verse 27, again, it's the word Hanukkah, the same Hebrew word. So what you guys are seeing is the idea of Hanukkah or dedication did not start with the Maccabees. That's the first thing that you guys want to know. The second thing you guys want to know is that Solomon actually built the temple from the ground up, right? So the temple was dedicated. Then the temple was destroyed, right? Then Cyrus gave the decree for the temple to be rebuilt. So the temple was rebuilt. And when the temple was rebuilt, it was not built as majestically as Solomon did it, but it was rebuilt. And the temple was dedicated again, right? Now, when you get to the story of the Maccabees, which we're going to get to later on, at that point, the temple was not destroyed. The temple was usurped. When the Greeks came in, they simply usurped the temple and started doing their sacrifices in our temple and put their pagan gods in our temple. That's what they did. So when the Maccabees were able to get back control of the temple, they simply followed the pattern that Solomon had created, even though the temple had not physically been destroyed. That's what you read about in the book of Maccabees. It's really as simple as that. So what I always tell people is that the feast in the book of Maccabees, although it is although it is commonly referred to as the Feast of Dedication, in fact, what the Maccabees did was a feast of rededication because the temple was not destroyed. It was just usurped. So when the Maccabees got a hold of the temple back from the heathen, they simply rededicated the temple again, right? Because of all the wickedness that was done in the temple when the heathens had control. So a lot of times I tell people that really it's a feast of rededication that we're celebrating or commemorating that the Maccabees did, although it's called the Feast of Dedication in the New Testament. So I understand why people say that, but the real dedication took place with Solomon and also after we rebuilt the temple the second time. That's where the actual dedication of a quote unquote temple from the ground up took place. In the place of the Maccabees, it wasn't a temple being built from the ground up. It was simply us just gaining control back of our temple after the heathen had it for a certain amount of time. I think everybody got it. No need for me to beat a dead horse. Let's move on. Now, I want to deal with prophecy really quick first, right? I went to the etymology online dictionary to look up the word prophecy. The word prophecy simply means the prediction of future events. The prediction of future events. Now, if you guys are following along in the PowerPoint, you guys can see that I have an icon also from the Novgorod school, the same place we saw King Solomon. We have an icon of the prophet Daniel, also from the Novgorod school, also a black man. Let's compare his hair and his complexion to the cap he's wearing or the scroll he's holding. And you guys can see that this is a black man as well. So we understand these things. No need to belabor the point. Lots to get through. Let's move on. Now, what you guys are going to find, if you're following along and looking at the PowerPoint, what you guys are going to find is I have a chronology of the prophecy of the book of Daniel. And Daniel chapter 11 is said to be according to this particular map. You know what I'm saying? And of course, maps, dates are kind of fluid, so it might be a little off, by a couple of years, whatever, but it just gives you guys an idea, a visual idea of what's going on. The book of Daniel chapter 11 is dated to sometime around 536 BC, give or take, right? About 536 BC, right? The events take place that we read about in the book of 1 Maccabees chapter 1, primarily during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, and he was born in 215 BC and died in 164. So what I'm showing you guys is that Daniel foretold of the events that would take place hundreds of years before they happen. That's all I want to show you guys. He prophesied of the event hundreds of years before it happened. It's very important to understand this, because when people try to deny the Apocrypha, they have to show you this prophecy that I'm going to show you in the book of Daniel. Where else can we read it? Where else do we get this history from outside of the Apocrypha? And at best, later on, the writings of Josephus, which also is hundreds of years, basically is hundreds of years after the history happens as well. Where do you get it? You get it in the Apocrypha. That's where you get it. Okay, so let's go real quick to the next slide. This is the book of Daniel, chapter 11, verses 29 through 32. This is Daniel prophesying concerning the events that we're going to read about inside the book of Maccabees. So this had to take place at some point, showing that the Apocrypha is actually on point, especially specifically what we're talking about today with the Maccabees. The Apocrypha is on point because the events that take place in 1 Maccabees chapter 1 through 4 match the prophecy of Daniel. This is the book of Daniel chapter 11. We're going to pick it up from verse number 29. And you guys are looking, that's a statue at the Altis Museum in Berlin of Antiochus Epiphanes. This is Daniel chapter 11, verse 29. I'm just going to really focus on the finer points because there's a lot to get through. And at the time appointed, he shall return and come towards the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. For the ships of Chittim shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. We're going to read about all of this in the first 4 chapters of Maccabees. That's why I'm not really taking time to go through it right now. We're actually going to read about this in the book of Maccabees. And have indignation against the holy covenant, so shall he do. And he shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. An arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary. That's when the Greeks went in and they set up the abomination of desolation in the temple, and they were sacrificing unclean animals on the altars and having sex with women in the temple as well. That's what Daniel is talking about and prophesying hundreds of years before it happened. So the history in the Apocrypha is accurate. Daniel already said that was going to happen, and you see it take place in the book of Maccabees, right? Let's move on. An arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength. They shall take away the daily sacrifice, which they did. We're going to read that. And they shall place the abomination and make it desolate. We're going to read about that. Verse 32. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries. But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. Who is these people that do know their God and that were strong and did exploits? That's the Maccabees and those that were with them. So Daniel prophesied about this hundreds of years before it happened. So I just want you guys to see that. So don't let nobody tell you, oh, the Apocrypha this, the Apocrypha that. If what's in the Apocrypha is not accurate, then you got to show us historically, where can we read about this happening elsewhere? We also see Yahushua observing, keeping the Feast of Dedication as well. This is the book of John, chapter 10, verses 22 and 23. And it was at Jerusalem, the Feast of Dedication. Why is the New Testament talking about a Feast of Dedication? When you read Leviticus chapter 23, our set apart days, the Feast of Dedication is not there. But if it's wicked, why is Yahushua observing the Feast of Dedication in the New Testament? Because it's not wicked. It's definitely a part of our history and a part of our culture. It is not on the same level as the days that we have in Leviticus chapter 23, because the Feast of Dedication is just that. It is a feast. That's what it is. But Yahushua observed it because it is a part of our culture, right? That's why we observe it. And it was at Jerusalem, the Feast of Dedication, and it was winter. And Jesus, Yahushua, walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. Now, what I have here, guys, on the screen is I have a replica of what the temple would have looked like during the time of Yahushua. And you guys can see this is what's called Solomon's porch, right? This is outside in the court of the Gentiles. You have what's called Solomon's porch right here. Now let's read a little bit about it. We ain't gonna read all this because this is a lot of words, right? It says Solomon's porch was the name of two porches associated with the temple in Jerusalem. The original temple constructed by King Solomon is described in 1 Kings. Let's read it. 1 Kings chapter 6. And it came to pass in the 480th year, after the children of Israel would come out the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month Ziph, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. And the house which King Solomon built for the Lord thereof was three score cubits, and the breadth thereof 20 cubits, and the height thereof 30 cubits. And the porch before the temple of the Lord's house, 20 cubits, was the length thereof, according to the breadth of the house. 10 cubits was the breadth, therefore, before the house. So Solomon's temple, the original temple he built, had a porch, right? You also can read about Solomon's porch. I'm not going to read all this right now, but if you guys are following the PowerPoint, you guys can read about Solomon's porch in John chapter 10, verse 23, which we have on the screen. And you also can read about Solomon's porch in Acts chapter 5, verse 12, right? And you also can read about it in Acts chapter 3, verse 11. Okay? So this is where Yahushua walked when he kept the Feast of Dedication. And we also see the apostles in this area as well when they would go to the temple, right? So the Bible is very consistent. It's a consistent golden thread that spreads throughout the history of the Bible. Let's move on. All right. Now let's roll up our sleeves and let's get down to 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1. Like I said, we have a lot to cover. This is the book of 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1. And it happened. After that, Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chedum, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. So if you look at the PowerPoint, I kind of gave you guys a visual aid. I gave you guys a list of the Achaemenid, aka the Persian kings, from Cyrus all the way down. So the writers of the Apocrypha did not tell you which Darius there was, because if you look at the screen, you guys can see there was Darius the first, right? He reigned from 522 to 485. You have Darius the second. He reigned approximately 423 to 404. And the last Darius is Darius the third, and he reigned from 336 to 330. This is a process in history, guys, called cultural synchronisms, because a lot of times you'll have a lot of people in histories of prominence in certain countries that share the same name. We see this in Egypt, we see this in Persia, we see this in Rome, we see this in Greece, where people share the same name. So you want to be as accurate as you can be so that you're really linking things together historically right. So that's why I have it on the screen for you guys to see. It was Darius the third, right? So let's read it again. It said, and it happened that after Alexander, the son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out the land of Chedum, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and the Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. Now here comes the problem. Like I told you guys, we're going to spend some time, because when we get to chapters 2, 3, and 4, we could breeze right through it because that's the Feast of Dedication. I want to spend some time here. This is an issue for people that say the Bible is historically accurate. Why is it calling Alexander the first over Greece? Why? Is that historically accurate? That's the question that you have to ask yourself. If somebody was to ask you that, what would you say? Well, we're going to talk about it today. Let's move on. First thing I want you guys to look at is, who are the Macedonians, right? So it says Alexander, the son of Philip, the Macedonians. So Philip and Alexander are Macedonians. Who are the Macedonians? Let's go to the book of Esther, chapter 16, which is in the Apocrypha. All we want is verse number 10, about another Macedonian by the name of Haman, right? It says, for Ammon, a Macedonian, the son of Amadatha, being indeed a stranger from the Persian blood and far distant from our goodness, and as a stranger received of us. So Ammon, the son of Amadatha, he was also a Macedonian just like Philip and Alexander was. Do you guys see that? Ammon was a Macedonian the way Philip and Alexander were. They were Macedonians, right? Now, let's look at Esther chapter 3. And we're going to, this is in the Bible, the regular KJV, and we're going to look at verse number 10. It says, and the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, same one as in the Apocrypha, the Agagite. So Esther chapter 16 tells you Ammon was a Macedonian, just like Alexander and Philip were, and that the Macedonians are descendants of a guy by the name of Agag. They are Agagites. That's what they are. Now let's go to the book of 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses 7 through 8. And Saul smote the Amalekites. And Saul smote the Amalekites. So the Macedonians are Agagites, some of them, not all of them. They're Agagites, and the Agagites come from the line of Amalek. And Saul smote the Amalekites from Havilah until thou comest to Shur, that is over against Egypt. And he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. Let's go to the next slide. Amalek is one of Esau's descendants. Amalek is Esau's grandson. It's the book of Genesis chapter 36. We're going to start from verse 1 and we're going to jump down to verse number 10. Now, these are the generations of Esau, who is Edom. Jumping down to verse number 10. These are the names of Esau's sons. You have Eliphaz, the son of Ada, the wife of Esau, Ruel, the son of Beshemath, the wife of Esau, and the sons of Eliphaz were Teman, Omar, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenaz. And Timnah was concubine to Eliphaz, Esau's son, and she bare Eliphaz Amalek. So Amalek is of the line of Esau. Now let's just run it back because somebody's lost. Amalek is of the line of Esau, right? Haman is an Agagite, and the Agagites are Amalekites, which are the sons of Esau. Ammon was also a Macedonian. The Macedonians are Edomites. These are Edomites. That's who they are. I need for you guys to understand that because we're going somewhere with this. I'm going to give you guys some history that maybe a lot of you guys don't know. We're answering the question, why is it calling Alexander the First over Greece? Why? So now we've established the Macedonians are Edomites, right? Okay, let's move on. This is the book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 1 again. And it happened that after Alexander, the son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Medes and Persians, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. What I want you guys to understand, and look at this map very carefully, Greece was once in ancient times a conglomeration of city-states. That's what you guys are looking at on the map. And to the north of these city-states, you had a land called Macedonia. This is where Alexander, Philip, Ammon, and the rest of these people, this is where they're from, these Edomites. And to the south of them, you have what's called the Greek city-states. Does everybody see that? You guys on Clubhouse, if you want to follow along, the link is at the top of the room. You had the Greek city-states down here to the south. Classical Greece consisted of Greek city-states. These Greek city-states formed confederations. These confederations were formed for the purpose of fighting against the Persians. This is where the Bible is picking it up from. This is why 1 Maccabees 1:1 is saying what it's saying. It's giving you the transition from when the Persians were a world power to when the Greeks were the world power. But we're going a little bit before that. We're going a little bit before that. So at this time, before Alexander and Philip come on the scene, you had a conglomeration of Greek city-states. And the Persians were trying to expand west their empire. That's what they were trying to do. So a lot of these Greek city-states formed confederations to go to war against the Persians, to fight the Persians off. But even though they did that, they were still divided against each other too. You had the Delian League. You had the Athenian League. You had the Achaean League. You had the Peloponnesian League. All these leagues were conglomerations of city-states that formed together for a lot of different reasons, but many times it was to fight off the Persians. And finally, you have what's called the Corinthian League, aka the Hellenic League. Everybody with me so far? Hopefully everybody's with me so far. These leagues were formed amongst these Greek city-states to fight off the Persians who were trying to expand their empire west. The Bible doesn't cover this part. It's very, very important for brothers and sisters to understand this concept. When we read the Bible and we read about these other nations in the Bible, the other nations in the Bible are mentioned in terms of, in most instances, it's mentioned in terms of our interaction with them. That's what it covers. It does not cover these other nations, their history from start to finish. That's not important because the Most High is not concerned with the other nations. The Most High is concerned with Israel. So in most cases, I don't want to say universally because there might be one or two cases, but in most cases, when the other nations are mentioned in the Bible, it is some type of interaction between the Israelites and them. So the Bible does not cover this history right here that was going on in classical or ancient Greece. When you had the city-states, it doesn't cover that. So you got to get that from extra biblical sources. And it's very, very important to notice. We're going to get there in a minute. So these Greek city-states form leagues, confederations, whatever word you want to use, to fight off the Persians who were trying to expand west. But even though they did that, they were fighting each other too. I need you guys to know that. We're going to come back to this point in a minute. Now, when these Greek city-states were divided, they had their little leagues where they would come together under these leagues to, like I said, to fight the Persians, but they still had their own individual city-states. What I want you guys to look at is the ones that had their own city-states, they also had their own kings. Like you guys look at the screen right there. Sparta had its own kings. So how could Alexander be the first over Greece if Sparta had its own kings before Alexander? How's that possible? Well, I'm going to give you guys the answer. I'm just asking. I'm trying to get your minds thinking. How's it possible? Thrace had their own kings too. You guys see that? The royal house of Thebes and their family tree. These are their kings, their royal families. How is this possible? How are these Greek city-states having kings if Alexander is their first king? How's that possible? Well, I want to start off by giving you guys a little bit of history so you can understand. I want to tie everything together now so we can get into the whole dedication thing. I want to tie it all together for you guys. Here is a small list of the most popular or the most well-known Greek city-states. They say at one time there was like 1,000 of them or somewhere close to that. But these are the most well-known Greek city-states, right? I'm going to focus on Crete. Crete, which is one of the Greek city-states, right? I have a link here to a Wikipedia article. I want to show you guys something. So I'm going to come out of the PowerPoint and I'm going to come over here to the internet and I'm going to show you guys something. How many of you guys know about the Minoans? Have you ever heard of the Minoans before? Some of you guys may have heard of the Minoans. Some of you guys may have never heard of the Minoans, but if you haven't, you're going to know about them today. Who are the Minoans? The Minoan civilization was a Bronze-aged culture which was centered on the Isle of Crete. So the Isle of Crete is one of your Greek city-states. That's what we're talking about. The Isle of Crete is one of your Greek city-states. This is before Philip, and this is before Alexander. And many of these Greek city-states had their own kings. So we're trying to reconcile, how can Alexander be the first king if these city-states, many of them had their own kings? We're trying to reconcile that. Is the Bible right? Is it wrong? We're going to see. Let's scroll down a little bit. I'm going to show you guys some stuff, right? This is an image of what the Cretans look like. Now your spidey senses should be going off. They were dark. They were dark-skinned. Today, you would call these people Samoans, Tongans, Fijians, Aboriginals of Australia, Aboriginals of New Zealand, Aboriginals of Hawaii. These are the people that were there in Crete. These are the people that lived in Rome before the Edomites went and kicked them out. They were called Etruscans or the Etruscans. You had the Mycenaeans. These are dark-skinned people in these city-states. They're not Israelites. These are the sons and daughters of Japheth. That was up there first. Here's another image of a procession from Knossos, 23 figures. These are your Cretans, right? Now, I want you guys to look at something because I'm going to show you this. I'm going to show you guys something, right? Everybody is dark in the image except this one right here and this one right here. These two. Everybody else is dark, right? Why is that? I'm going to show you. Right. Same article about the Minoans. We're under the portion that says the status of women. I want you guys to see this right here. Artistically, let me highlight it for you guys. Artistically, women were portrayed very different from men. Men were often artistically represented with dark skin because the Cretans, the original Etruscans, the original Mycenaeans, they were dark. These are the sons and daughters of Japheth. The problem is that a lot of the men were known to grow their hair really long, like the women did. So in the artwork, you couldn't tell the difference between the man and the woman. You couldn't tell. So one of the ways that they decided to be able for somebody that's observing the artwork to be able to tell the difference between a man and a woman, the men retained their natural complexion as being brown. But in order to identify a woman in the same picture, they painted her light. That's the only reason why you see stuff like this. That's the only reason why you see. And here's another image of the Crete, the Minoans, dark. So it's clear these are dark people, and they dwelled on the Isle of Crete, right? Let's come back here real quick. Artistically, women were portrayed very different from men. Men were often artistically represented with dark skin, while women were represented with lighter skin. So what happens is, let me come back to the picture I was showing you guys a minute ago, and then we're going to move on. The reason why these women are painted this way is not because they were white, because the Cretans were dark. This was done so that you could tell the difference between the women and the men. That's why. Does everybody see that? Okay. Where did these Cretans dwell? Where did these Minoans dwell? They dwelt on the Isle of Crete. Now we're going to come back to the PowerPoint. And we're going to pick it up from right here and tie everything together. The Macedonians, who are Edomites, sided with, okay, let me take it back a little bit. I kind of skipped something. You had a war in history called the Peloponnesian War. Like I said, these Japhites, although they had these confederations and these leagues to fight against the Persians, they would also fight each other too. So you had a series of wars that broke out called the Peloponnesian Wars. The Macedonians, which is Esau, the white man, joined the Peloponnesian League with Sparta against Athens. They took a side. They took a side. They're a completely different nation, a completely different quote-unquote race. You have the Japhites fighting each other. Esau came in the middle of it and picked a side and said, I'm siding with the Peloponnesians, which was Sparta. Esau always minding somebody else's business. And what would eventually happen, I'm kind of giving it away already. What would eventually happen is after the Peloponnesian War was over, there were so many casualties on both sides that the white man came in and usurped control over everything and put all the Greek city-states under him. That's what your Bible is telling you. See, the Bible is concise. Prior to Philip and Alexander, the Greek city-states, they were just a bunch of different city-states with their own kings and all that. They had loose confederations to fight the Persians, but they were not centralized. The Bible's not concerned with that. It was time for the Persian Empire to go down, and the next great empire to rise up would be the Greeks. So when that time came, and Alexander being a chosen vessel to do it, right, the Most High had them intervene in a war amongst the dark Greeks, which are the Japhite people, right? Pick a side. After these Japhites are done killing each other, right, and pillaging each other, the white man comes and takes control over both of them and everybody else and puts everybody under him. And now it's no longer all these Greek city-states. Now it's one Greece under Philip and Alexander. Do you guys get it? Hopefully you guys are not lost. That's what the Bible is teaching. What I'm showing, the Bible is not wrong. It's not wrong. What the Bible is doing is being concise. It's not concerned with when you had the Greek city-states. It's not concerned with the Peloponnesian War. The Bible is concerned when power is centralized under Philip and Alexander, because it's from them that they will put Israel into captivity because we broke God's laws. That's what it's concerned with. Does everybody get it? So the Bible's not wrong. I had somebody tell me the Bible's wrong about it. It's not wrong. You just don't know history. That's the thing. Now, I said all that. Let's watch this video, and I'm going to give some commentary on it. Let's go.
The war between Athens, leader of the Delian League of Allied City-States and Colonies, against Sparta, leader of the Peloponnesian League.
So you have the Delian League, which was Athens, outlined in purple, right? And you had the Peloponnesian League, which was run by Sparta, down here. And these two sides went to war. Guys, notice up north above the Delian League, you have more red. This is where Macedonia is. I told you, the Greeks sided with these guys. And after these two was done killing each other, they just came in and took over. Let's go.
Pitted a powerful navy against one of the most dominant infantry forces in history. Preceding this conflict, Athens had defeated a Persian invasion force at the Battle of Marathon.
So you guys are seeing the Persians were invading. They were trying to spread west. And these guys got together into these different leagues to fight the Persians off.
A decade later, a much larger Persian invasion force suffered major setbacks and defeats at Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans famously fought to the last man. Then at Salamis, the Persians were dealt a major naval defeat against the Athenian navy. And finally at Plataea, the Persian army was defeated on land, before downsizing and eventually abandoning the campaign. For the next half-century, both states followed an anti-Persian policy and supported any anti-Persian activities in the Eastern Mediterranean.
So that's the only place they agreed. They agreed that the Persians were the enemy. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So you know what? Yeah, we're divided pretty much, but we'll side together to fight against the Persian. These are the dark-skinned Japhites that were doing this, not Esau, not yet. Not yet. Esau is going to come in after these guys get done killing each other and just take over. That's why the symbol of the white man is the eagle. The eagle preys on the weak. You guys know that eagles don't prey on strong animals. They prey on weak animals and wounded animals. That's what they do. That's the white man. That's what he is. He knows who he is.
Allowing for an intermittent peace to exist between Athens and Sparta. In order to fight the Persians at sea, the Athenians formed the Delian League. By exercising more and more control over the members of the league, Athens converted this coalition into an empire, exacting tribute from its members. From the money extracted from her client states, Athens built herself into a city that was the envy of the Hellenistic world, and a fleet of 300 triple-banked galleys. Each of these triremes was manned by a crew of 170 professional oarsmen. The city-state of Corinth had been the dominant maritime power prior to the Persian Wars, and as Athens' power grew, her navy outnumbered Corinth's fleet 3-1, and began to incite rebellion in her colonies and encroach on its trade routes. In a series of small conflicts lasting 15 years, known as the First Peloponnesian War, Sparta opposed Athens and defeated the Athenian army in one non-decisive engagement, while Athens continued to expand her naval power. One significant development during this period was the rebuilding of Athens' walls on a grand scale, with a long causeway connecting Athens with the port city of Piraeus, allowing Athens to be fully supplied by sea, even if an invading army would destroy the surrounding countryside and farmland. This hostile period ended with the so-called 30 Years' Peace between the two city-states, that would last for less than half of its intended duration. Despite this peace, hostility between Athens and Corinth continued, and in 431 BC, Corinth successfully convinced Sparta and the Peloponnesian League to declare war on Athens, with the goal of ending the burgeoning Athenian Empire. The first phase of the Second Peloponnesian War, commonly referred to as simply the Peloponnesian War, is known as the Archidamian War, where Sparta pursued a policy of pillaging the countryside around Athens in an attempt to provoke a pitched battle. The Athenians had anticipated the Spartan strategy and had organized a continuous flow of grain shipments from Egypt and colonies on the Aegean and Black Sea coasts. The Athenian strategy was to blockade the Peloponnesian Peninsula from any trade and supplies, while opportunistically raiding Sparta's allies.
All I'm showing you, I'm going to let the video play out. It's like another 2 minutes. All I'm showing you is that you had these dark-skinned Japhites that formed under these leagues that were really supposed to be fighting against the Persian. They started fighting against each other. That's what they started doing. It's the same thing that happened with the gangs. A lot of gangs, the origin of a lot of gangs, especially the gangs out west, they started to protect the neighborhood, and then they turned on each other. That's history repeats itself over and over again. It's amazing. Let's go.
Initially, the Athenians seemed to be maintaining the upper hand in this asymmetric war of attrition that had been carefully planned for years by the Athenian statesman Pericles. The population from the surrounding countryside poured in behind the safety of the Athenian walls in the early stages of the war. This had been taken into account beforehand, and wealthy Athens had more than enough food flowing into the crowded city to feed everyone. What had not been taken into account was tainted grain shipments carrying plague, which rapidly spread through the overcrowded city. Initially, the city was resilient, inspired by the charismatic rhetoric of Pericles. An estimated 1 in 4 Athenians succumbed to the plague, including Pericles and his sons, before it had run its course.
So between war and a plague, a lot of these Japhites were dying out. They were either dying out from this plague that came, or they was dying out from the war that they were having between each other, and the white man's just sitting back licking his chops.
At the height, mercenaries refused to fight for Athens, and even the Spartans ceased to campaign near Athens for fear of catching the plague. Ironically, the masterfully planned Athenian blockade of the Peloponnese had protected Sparta and its allies from receiving any of the plague-tainted grain. The Athenian survivors adopted a much more aggressive strategy, greatly increasing the raids and building fortified outposts along the Peloponnesian coast. The Helots, Spartan slaves that outnumbered them 10-1, were encouraged to run away to these outposts, which put pressure on Sparta to defend the home front. This phase of the war ended with the 50-year Peace of Nicias, which never really went into full effect, with both belligerents raiding each other through proxies from the onset, and eventually directly. In 415 BC, the Athenians devised a plan they believed would bestow upon themselves an overwhelming advantage: the conquest of the fabulously wealthy city-state of Syracuse, on the island of Sicily, who along with Athens and Carthage controlled the lion's share of Mediterranean trade. Led by the young charismatic Athenian statesman Alcibiades, the expedition ended in disaster, with Athens losing over 10,000 hoplites and 2/3 of her navy. Ships could be rebuilt, but the 30,000 professional oarsmen could not be replaced. This was followed by further disasters. Sparta freed 20,000 Athenian slaves in the city's silver mines. Athens then raised the tribute from her vassals, which caused widespread revolt in Ionia, for which this final stage of the war is named. The Athenian general Alcibiades, fearing retribution for his failure, switched sides and fought for Sparta, who began to receive vast sums of money from the Persian Empire, who viewed the Athenian Empire as a greater threat. With this, Sparta built up its fleet and combined with its Corinthian allies, decisively defeated the Athenian navy at Aegospotami.
That's all I want you guys to know. I know that was a lot. What I want you guys to know is these guys went to war, and between plagues and illnesses and them killing each other, you know what I'm saying? They lost a lot of people on both sides. But Sparta would eventually win the war. The problem was now these guys were ripe for the taking, and in comes Esau. Listen.
Athens, now effectively without a navy, was besieged by Sparta and promptly surrendered. Spartan hegemony over the Greek world would be short-lived. Its most precious resource, Spartan warriors, had become far too low to maintain an empire. And after a series of smaller wars, in the aftermath of the Peloponnesian War, Philip of Macedon, the father of Alexander the Great, was able to conquer the decimated Greek city-states.
And that's what happened, brothers and sisters. That's the point. Philip of Macedonia conquered those Greek city-states after they went to war with each other. Now, let's read this article from the Encyclopedia Britannica. After the aftermath of the Peloponnesian War, where the Delian League was decimated, the Peloponnesian League was decimated because of the war, what comes after that? This is the Encyclopedia Britannica under the entry, the League of Corinth. Listen, the League of Corinth, offensive and defensive alliance of what? All Greek states except Sparta. So all them other Greek city-states, all of them, and there were thousands. There was like 1,000. All of them united under Philip of Macedonia. All of them. This is why the Bible is saying what it's saying. So the Bible is not wrong. The Bible is being concise. Now you have a united federation of Greece. And this is what Alexander becomes the first king of. It was no longer divided into all these city-states. No, with their own kings. No. Now it's a united federation of these Greek city-states under Alexander. That's what the Bible is teaching. They moved the original inhabitants out and took over. Same thing they did with the Native Americans here and stole their history. The same thing they did to us in Europe when they took us down after the Dark Ages. It's the same thing they do everywhere. They pushed the original inhabitants of the land out. They did it in Israel, of course. They pushed the original inhabitants out. They move in and they claim that history. But this is a very important part in time in history because you're seeing a transition of one nation, which is the children of Japheth, being moved out, and the white man moving in, taking over, and now calling himself a Greek. And that's what the Bible is teaching. That's what it's showing us. It picks it up from this point right here with the League of Corinth. All of that other stuff that I showed y'all with the Greek city-states, all the stuff I showed y'all with the Peloponnesian War, the Bible's not concerned about that. That's not our history. But the new empire, that third beast that Daniel saw, is about to rise up, which means we're about to catch hell again for breaking God's laws. So the Bible's concerned with that. So it starts telling the story from here. The League of Corinth, offensive and defensive alliance of all Greek states except Sparta, organized in 337 BC at Corinth under the leadership of Philip of Macedon. That's what this is going into, right here in 1 Maccabees chapter 1. A council of Greeks to which each state elected delegates proportionate to its military and naval strength, decided all matters of federal government, including foreign policy, and its first meeting, the League decided to conduct a war against Persia. That's what this is going into. And elected Philip commander of its armed forces. When he was murdered the following year, his son Alexander the Great succeeded him as the head of the League, and he's the one that smote Darius III and became the first over Greece, meaning the first king over a united federation of Greek states. All that history that I just showed y'all in one verse. So no, the Bible is not wrong. Okay. Now it makes sense. Now the Bible makes sense. Alexander was the first over a pan-Hellenic or united Greece, and he was also the first Edomite because he was a Macedonian. That's what he was. Right? Now we can move on. Real quick, I kind of wanted to show you guys this too. This is kind of an aside, but since we're learning, I'm going to show you guys this real quick. If you look at the king's list from the Thebans when they were a Greek city-state, an independent Greek city-state, this is their king's list and their royal family. What you guys will see when you look at this, right? These ones right here in yellow, these are their so-called deities, their so-called gods. Their gods appear on their king's list. You know where they got that idea from? They got that idea from Egypt. This is your Turin Papyrus in Egypt, aka the Turin King's List. And what do you guys see here on the Turin's King's List? The Egyptian gods are named kings. Before you actually have a physical king on the earth, the first people listed on the Egyptian King's List is their gods. This is called the Turin Papyrus, right? Column 1, from all the way down, is their gods. Then when you come to column number 2, down here, number 11, you get Menes, aka Narmer, and he's this person that's said to have united Egypt, Upper and Lower Egypt. He's the person they said united Egypt, this guy right here. But before him, these are all the Egyptian gods. That idea was stolen by the Greeks. The Greeks just literally stole it. Just want you guys to see that. This is going to make sense later in the PowerPoint. All right, let's keep going. Now, let's go to the book of Daniel chapter 7 really quickly. This is the book of Daniel chapter 7. I'm going to start from verse number 1. And I'm going to jump down verse number 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to jump down to verse number 6 real quick. It says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. These four great beasts are four kingdoms that would rise up on the earth and go into power. And guess what? For breaking God's laws, the Israelites would be subject to these four kings. We're subject to a lot of other nations too, but these particular four world powers that Daniel saw, we would be subject to them and in captivity under these nations for breaking God's laws, right? So at the time we're talking about right now, which is during the time of Alexander, they're the third beast. So let's jump down to verse number 6. It says, and after this, the first beast, by the way, was the Assyro-Babylonian Empire, the lion with wings, right? The second beast was a bear, right? That's the Medes and the Persians, right? The third beast now that we're dealing with, this is the Greeks. This is where we're picking up in verse number 6. It says, after this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given unto it. This is the Greeks, right? Now, I want to show you guys something, right? This is an actual fresco or painting of Alexander going to war, right? Now, I want you guys to notice a lot of times when they make these images of Alexander, he's always riding a horse with leopard skin on it. Do you guys see that right there? It's kind of broken off a little bit, but you guys can see it with the arrow. When they remade the movie of Alexander starring Colin Farrell, they were sure to put that in the movie as well. You see the horse wearing the leopard skin. right? Now, there's a lot of theories as to why the Most High compared Alexander or the Greeks to a leopard. One of the reasons why that I always teach people is because Alexander himself, one of his heroes growing up, was a god by the name of Dionysus. That was one of his heroes, right? This is Dionysus right here. And you guys see in multiple depictions, and you can find these easily on Google Images, in multiple depictions, when you see Dionysus, you see him riding the leopard. He literally was one of Alexander's heroes. Zeus was another, which we're going to get to later. So that's one of the reasons why you see the comparison of the leopard. Now, other people have said, commentaries would tell you it's because he went against the other nations and destroyed them fast, quickly, so forth and so on. You can say that. I'm not going to say that that's wrong. You can also break it down that way as well. But literally, you always see Alexander with this leopard skin because Dionysus was a hero of his. Okay? Just want to let you guys know that. And they put that stuff in movies.
Come, Alexander. Drink with us. Alexander. I remember a time you hated how your father drank. I know why. Dionysus is hero, but he is also a mind breaker.
So Dionysus is a hero because that was one of Alexander's heroes growing up. I don't want to spend too much time on this right now, so I'm going to go ahead and go ahead. The point has been made, right? Now, here's the next skeptical issue that people have that we have to resolve. Got to resolve it. Daniel says the beast had 4 wings and 4 heads. So we teach that the 4 wings and the 4 heads represent Alexander's 4 generals, right? Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. And that's correct. The Bible is being concise. The Bible's being concise, is getting to the point. What you should know, if somebody tries to challenge you on this, what you should know is Alexander had more than 4 generals. If you're watching the PowerPoint, I'm showing you that on the map. Alexander actually had 6 generals. He didn't have 4, he had 6. So why is the Bible saying 4 if he had 6? Well, let's look at them first. You got Seleucus right here. You have Lysimachus right here. You have Cassander right here. And you have Ptolemy right here. These are the 4 that Daniel is talking about. But in the middle, you have another general by the name of Antiochus. Do you guys see that? You have another general here by the name of Antiochus as well. So he's the 5th one. So why is the Bible saying 4? The answer is, brothers and sisters, because of the Battle of Ipsos. At the Battle of Ipsos, Seleucus, right here, at the Battle of Ipsos, Seleucus defeated Antiochus. He defeated him in a war. They had a war together. So let's go back to the map. Here's the Seleucus' empire right here. Here's Antiochus' empire right here, side by side. These two went to war. The same way the Japhites went to war. After Alexander died, his men went to war. So you had Seleucus and Antiochus here. Seleucus went to war with Antiochus, and he prevailed. And so what happened is Seleucus took over all of Antiochus' land, all of it. So his empire spread from here all the way up in here as well. And this is why the Bible is calling it 4, because Antiochus really did not rule for very long. He wasn't really a major factor in history. But Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus were. So instead of getting into all the finer details of what took place in Greek history, the Bible gets to the point where it's just the four. It's just the four. That's what it's doing. Hopefully everybody understands. Somebody has to explain these things to you, because these are the things that people try to pick out the Bible to try to come against the Bible. But it's not historically accurate. It is. It does not concern itself with being exhaustive when it comes to the other nation's history. It doesn't do that, because it's our history. When it deals with the other nations, it just deals with them in a concise manner in terms of them dealing with us or something going on in that nation that will affect us. So we're informed of the four because the four is what was left standing after Antiochus was defeated. Hopefully everybody understands that. And this was done at the Battle of Ipsos. I'm not going to read all that. You guys could do that research yourself. Now, couple more things. This is the complete work of Flavius Josephus, and this is on page number 244, right? I'm just going to read this portion right here, just for the sake of time, right? Basically, according to the historian Josephus, when Alexander marched on Jerusalem, you had the priests that they met him and showed him the book of Daniel, like we just read, and told him he was the guy that was going to fulfill those prophecies. Let's read what Josephus says right here. And when he had said this to Parmenio and had given the high priest his right hand, the priest ran along by him, and he came into the city. And when he went into the temple, he offered sacrifice to God according to the high priest's direction, and magnificently treated both the high priest and the priests. And when the book of Daniel was showed him, wherein Daniel declared that one of the Greeks would destroy the empire of the Persians, he supposed that himself was the person intended. So the priest showed Alexander the book of Daniel and said, that's you. You're the guy that's going to fulfill that prophecy. It goes on to say, and as he was glad, he dismissed the multitude for the present, but the next day he called them unto him and bade them ask what favors they pleased of him. Whereupon the high priest declared that they might enjoy the laws of their forefathers. So Alexander allowed the Jews that were in Jerusalem still to keep the laws of their forefathers. Of course, that's going to change after Alexander dies. And might pay no tribute on the 7th year. He granted all they desired, and when they entreated him that he would permit the Jews in Babylon and Media missed to do hereafter what they desired. Okay, so I just wanted to show you guys that. And in other portions of this book as well, it even tells you that some of the Jews joined Alexander's army and fought with him. That's what they did. That's what they did. Now, I want to show you guys something else. I know I'm showing you guys a lot of stuff, and like I said, to a lot of people, this stuff is new. Daniel said something else as well, right? This is the book of Daniel, chapter 11. We're going to pick it up from verse number 4. This is all dealing with the same stuff that we're dealing with. It says, and when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided towards the four winds of heaven and not to his posterity. So basically, this is what happened, to give you guys a concise history. Alexander got a woman pregnant before he died. But before the child was born, he died. And so the kingdom was not given to his son the way Philip gave it to Alexander. That didn't happen. Because the child was not born yet, instead, Alexander gave the kingdom to his generals. That's what he did. He had another son called Alexander IV, but that child did not rule. So the Bible is right about that. The Bible is accurate, 100% accurate on these matters. Let's keep going. All right. So now we understand all that stuff that we went through, and I know that was a lot. We understand exactly what's happened in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1. Alexander ruled as the first king over a united federation of Greece. Before that, they were divided into different federations, different leagues, fighting the Persians and fighting each other. Philip and Alexander united those factions under them. That's what the Bible is teaching you. Let's move on. Verse number 2. And made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth, and went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him. Whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up, and he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him, including us. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Verse number 6, 1 Maccabees 1, verse 6. Wherefore he called his servants, his generals, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them, right, because his son was unborn yet. Somebody had to take over, so he parted the kingdom amongst these 4 generals while he was yet alive. Wherefore, and these are the servants, Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. These are the 4 that were left after Antiochus was out of the way. Right? So the Bible is accurate. Just so you guys know, even though Alexander had these 4 generals, only 2 of them were really prominent in history, like to a great extent. That's Ptolemy and Seleucus. You don't really see much mention of these guys outside of what you see in the book of Daniel. You don't really see much mention of these guys outside of that. But these guys right here are very prominent in history. The Ptolemaic line and the Seleucid line. That's what Daniel chapter 11 is all about. It's about the wars between Ptolemy and his sons and Seleucus and his sons. Because like I said, you had the different leagues that were warring with each other. Then after the Peloponnesian War, they united under Philip and Alexander. But as soon as Alexander died and parted his kingdom amongst his men, now his men are fighting each other. Satan is divided against Satan. That's what Daniel chapter 11 is about. Ptolemy and Seleucus fighting and going to war on their sons. That's what it's about. It's called the Syrian Wars. Right? Okay. 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 7. So Alexander reigned 12 years, and then he died. And his servants bear rule, every one in his place. Verse number 9. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, and so did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied upon the earth. And I just gave you guys a concise list of the kings that ruled in the Seleucid line and the kings that ruled in the Ptolemaic or the Ptolemid line. This is them. The one stark difference you guys are going to see is that the Ptolemies kept the family name. They kept it going all the way through pretty much. But you guys will notice that the Seleucid line, their names kind of bounce around a little bit, right? This is where you get Antiochus from. Antiochus is of the Seleucid line of kings. The name is different, so if you don't know that, you won't really be keeping up. But Antiochus is of the Seleucid line of kings. All right, even though he has a different name than Seleucus had. Let's move on. Verse number 10. And there came out of them, what them? The Seleucid line, a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage at Rome. And he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. So Antiochus Epiphanes, aka Antiochus IV, is from the Seleucid line. It says he had a surname Epiphanes. What's that about? Well, what is a surname or a nickname? A surname or nickname is an added name from an occupation or other circumstance. Like in the book of Acts chapter 13, it says, and they were dwelling at Jerusalem, Jews, devout men out of every, and they were in the church at Antioch, certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simeon, that was called Niger. Simeon was called Niger. Niger is Simeon's surname. It's not his real name. That's a nickname, right? So Antiochus is his name, but he had a nickname. His nickname was Epiphanes. Why? Well, this is from the New World Encyclopedia. See, Antiochus regarded himself as Zeus in the flesh. So since he regarded himself as Zeus in the flesh, that's why he took the name. He was a proud guy. Antiochus regarded himself as Zeus, the Greek god. He gave lavishly to Greek temples, including the temple of Zeus in Athens. His self-view as the supreme god meant he saw himself as having power over all religions in his realm, which is why he would eventually order us that we couldn't keep our customs, because he saw himself as God and he wanted us to worship him as God. Okay, let's move on. It's the book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 11. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we have departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. First thing I want you guys to notice, without constraint, without force, you already had a faction of the Jews that wanted to Hellenize themselves before the white men even forced them to do it. I always tell people this. Not everybody was forced into Hellenized customs. Some of the Jews did it voluntarily. That's what we're reading right here. The first wave of Hellenization was voluntary. You had Jews that joined Alexander's army, joined the armies of Ptolemy and all these other Greek kings that would come after. You had people that voluntarily joined the army, voluntarily did all that stuff without force. That's what we're reading right here. Verse 12. So this device pleased them well. 13. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. The king said, yeah, you guys don't have to keep them laws if you don't want to. You can be like us and worship our gods and do what we do. And that pleased some of our people. Just like today, same spirit that was back then is the same spirit that's on our people today. Whatever perversion these other nations are into, you're going to find a Negro there at somewhere doing the same thing. One of these devices that pleased us well, brothers and sisters, was to change our names. Let's read it. This is from the same book. Let me go back a little bit. This is the book called The Jews in Their Land by David Ben-Gurion, okay? And I am right here on page 129. Hopefully you guys can see it. Hopefully, right? This is what it says. It says, in Jerusalem, the opponents of Onias gained control of the temple, apparently as a result of the change, and took the earliest opportunity to institute radical administrative reforms that would enable them to carry out their plans in the temple of Jerusalem and throughout Judea. Life in the capital was revolutionized completely, and alien manners. So there were alien manners, meaning the customs of the heathens, right? And alien manners, names, meaning what? Meaning a lot of the Jews that wanted to be like the Greeks, you know what they started doing? They started giving their children Greek names. This is before Christ comes on the scene. I need you guys to really think. This is before Christ comes on the scene. We're changing our customs and we're changing our names. Why do you guys think by the time Christ is on the scene in the New Testament, and then Paul is on the scene later, why do you think a lot of the Israelites have Greek names? I've heard dumb people in the conscious community say, well, the reason why they had names like Peter and James and Paul is because they were white men. No, dummy. No, you don't know history. When we got up under these other nations, we took their customs and we took their names. You see that happen today. Where I work, you have a lot of Asians, so-called Chinese. They don't call themselves Shinzu and, any of those names. Wang, Tang, whatever. They don't call themselves any of those names. The Chinese folks where I work, their names is Jim, Bob, Bill, Peter. You look at this guy like, you don't even look like a Peter. But that's what nations do. When you go into another nation and you adopt their customs, a lot of times when you adopt their customs, you basically abandon your own. That's what we did. So Noah doesn't follow when you get to the New Testament because you see a name like Cornelius, because you see a name like Timothy, because you see a name like Titus, that they were white men. I've heard people teach that. No. That was us discontinuing from our heritage, discontinuing from our culture, leaving our name for a curse and wanting to be like the other nations. That's what we did. Alien manners, names, and forms of behavior were introduced. For example, Joshua, the son of Onias and one of the leaders of the revolution, changed his name to Jason. That's the Jason you read about in the book of First Maccabees, in the first book of First Maccabees. His real Hebrew name was Joshua or Yahushai, but he said he wanted to be called Jason because he preferred the customs of the Greeks more than his own. Now you understand why people in the New Testament have Greek and Roman names. This is what we did. Verse 13. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Verse 14. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen. We went so far left, brothers and sisters, that we built a gym in Jerusalem. The same thing. If you study the history of the gymnasiums, there was gymnasiums in all the cities that the Greeks ruled. Just like there were temples in all the cities the Greeks ruled, there were gymnasiums in all the cities the Greek ruled. We allowed for a temple to be built in Jerusalem. We allowed for pagan temples to be built in Jerusalem. We allowed for a gymnasium to be built in Jerusalem. What is the origin of gymnasium? It means a place where people train naked. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that today, because sometimes people try to use this as an excuse not to exercise. The gymnasium had a whole different function in the ancient world than it does today. Some of the stuff has spilled over, don't get it twisted. But it was different back then. I have a video attached, but because of this, for the sake of time, I'm not going to play it. But in the ancient gymnasiums, they basically exercised butt naked. There were bathhouses in those gyms where you had a lot of pederasty going on, men sleeping with little boys. You had sacrifices, animal sacrifices being made in and around these gymnasiums to Hercules. And there was also a place for Greek philosophers to come and spit that Greek philosophy. So it was a lot of things going on in the gym besides just the exercise. The exercise is not the wicked part. It's the naked exercise that's wicked. It's the pederasty and the rest of it that's wicked. That's what made it wicked. So nobody don't get simple and be like, going to the gym is wicked. No, it's not. Its original intent amongst the Greeks was wicked. But today you can utilize it, just don't abuse it, to get yourself in shape. It's not an excuse. So don't even try it. Let's move on. All right. I'm going to skip this for now, right? I'm going to skip this slide for now as well. And this one too. Everything that I just said to you guys is in these slides. But for the sake of time, I'm going to skip some of this stuff. And this is just an example of one of the gymnasiums or the ruins of a gymnasium that they have in a bathhouse at a place called Delphi, right? So let's pick it up at verse number 15. And made themselves uncircumcised. So a lot of our people stopped performing the custom of actually circumcising their children, literally. This is before Christ is born. So now think about it. Successive generations later, when Christ is on the scene and Paul is on the scene, that's why these conversations are now a big topic. Like when you read the book of Galatians chapter 2 and chapter 3, when you read the book of Romans chapter 2, the conversation about circumcision is a big deal because from this time on up, right through when the Romans were ruling, a lot of Israelites stopped circumcising their children. And then when Christ would come on the scene, the ones that would accept Christ in his ministry, a lot of them were already full-grown adults. They were already past the age of circumcision that Moses had given us, which is why it became a problem. But the genesis of the problem starts here with us wanting to be like the other nations. Let's move on. Verse number 16. Now, when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt that he might have dominion over two realms. So Antiochus got greedy. He got greedy. He said, you know what? I want to rule Egypt too. I'm tired of the Ptolemies. I want to rule Egypt too. All right. Let's move on. Verse number 17. Wherefore, he entered into Egypt with a great multitude of chariots and elephants and horsemen and a great navy. And by the way, this is what Daniel was prophesying about that we read at the beginning of this PowerPoint. Now we're actually reading it play out hundreds of years later. And made war against Ptolemy, king of Egypt. But Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, and many were wounded to death. Thus, they got strong cities in the land of Egypt, and he took the spoils thereof. And after that Antiochus had smitten Egypt, he returned again in the 143rd year, and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude, and entered proudly into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar, that's what Daniel spoke about, and the candlestick of light, that's our so-called menorah, right? And all the vessels thereof, and the table of showbread, and the pouring vessels, and the vials, and the censer of gold, and the veil, and the crown, and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off. He took also the silver and the gold, and precious vessels, and also took the hidden treasures which he found. And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre, and spoke very proudly. Therefore, there was a great mourning in Israel in every place where they were, so that princes and elders mourned. The virgins and young men were made feeble, and the beauty of the women was changed. Every bridegroom took up lamentation, and she that sat in the marriage chamber was in heaviness. The land also was moved for the inhabitants thereof, and all the house of Jacob was covered with confusion. And after 2 years fully expired, the king sent his chief collector of tribute unto the cities of Judah, who came unto Jerusalem with a great multitude, and spake peaceable words unto them. But all was deceit. For when they had given him credence, he fell suddenly upon the city, and smote it very sore, and destroyed much of the people. And all this is a consequence for us being wicked. And we saw in the first chapter that as soon as the Greeks got into power, you had a lot of us that voluntarily Hellenized and started doing this stuff. So the Most High used the same heathen to bring judgment on our people. That's what he did. And when he had taken the spoils of the city, he set it on fire and pulled down the houses and the walls thereof on every side. But the women and children took they captive and possessed the cattle. Then builded they the city of David with a great and strong wall with mighty towers, and made it strong, and made it a stronghold for them. And they put therein a sinful nation, wicked men, and fortified themselves therein. They stored it also with armor and victuals. And when they had gathered together the spoils of Jerusalem, they laid them up there, so they became a sore snare. For it was a place to lie in wait against the sanctuary, and an evil adversary to Israel. Thus they shed innocent blood on every side of the sanctuary and defiled it, insomuch that the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them. So a lot of our people left Jerusalem because of this was going on. Whereupon the city was made an habitation of strangers, and became strange to those that were born in her and her own children. Verse number 39. Her sanctuary was laid waste like a wilderness. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into reproach, her honor into contempt. As had been her glory, so was her dishonor increased, and her excellency was turned into mourning. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people. So now he wanted to unify all the different nations that he was ruling, all the different areas. He wanted everybody to start following after those Greek customs. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. So you had a lot of Israelites that saw the judgment of God coming down through these heathens, destroying the city. And instead of our people repenting or doing the right thing, they joined up with the heathen against the Israelites that still wanted to keep the law. The Bible says that which was written aforetime is for our learning. We're coming into a time like that again. A lot of our people that side with this kingdom, we speak against this kingdom. We speak about this kingdom being destroyed. A lot of our people are going to come against us in these last days, but we want to stand up and keep the commandments. That's why it says in the book of Daniel, chapter 12, that the serpent is going to make war with the remnant of her seed to do what? Keep the commandments. They're going to make war with us. And they're going to convince a lot of our people to side with them in their war against us, just like Antiochus did. It's going to be the same thing. Verse number 44. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that they should follow the strange laws of the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbath and festival days. This is what Daniel prophesied about that we read at the beginning of the PowerPoint. Now we see it actually taking place through this vessel, this wicked vessel called Antiochus Epiphanes. Verse number 45. And forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and the festival days. As I told y'all before, that's what Daniel was talking about, so I brought it right back so you guys can see it. Right? And pollute the sanctuary and the holy people. Set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts. That they should also leave their children uncircumcised, which is why in the New Testament you have these arguments about circumcision and uncircumcision, because that custom had been passed down by the parents that went along with the stuff. And many of our people discontinued from their heritage for a period of time until Christ had come and died, and then appeared to Paul on the road to Damascus for Paul to go into these areas where Israel was scattered, and they were speaking Greek. They couldn't speak Hebrew. They were speaking Greek, and Paul spoke Greek, to go and teach them about Yahushua and repentance. And by the time he got to some of these people to teach them the gospel of Yahushua and they could repent, a lot of these people were past the age of being circumcised, like Moses said. It all starts here. Verse 48 again, that they should also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, to the end that they might forget the law and change the ordinances. And whosoever should not do according to the commandment of the king, he said, he should die. So if you didn't do what the king said, you'd be put to death. In the selfsame manner wrote he to his whole kingdom and appointed overseers over all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city. Then many of the people were gathered unto them, to wit, everyone that forsook the law, and so they committed evils in the land. and drove the Israelites into secret places, even whithersoever they could flee for succor. This same thing that happened, that Antiochus did, would happen when the Romans ruled as well. A lot of Israelites had to flee underground. That's why you have something called catacombs. Same thing. It's just history repeating itself over and over and over again. Now, the 15th day of the month of Caslu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side. So Esau set up the abomination of desolation. What's that? Well, this is from the same book, The Jews in Their Land, by David Ben-Gurion. We're going to go over to page 132, and we're going to start right here for this paragraph that says, the Seleucid. It said the Seleucid military measures led finally to sacrilege. On the 25th of the Hebrew month of Kislev, 167 BC, an abomination of desolation was placed on the altar of the temple in the Lord's sanctuary in Holy Jerusalem. What was the abomination of desolation? The graven image of an earthbound god of the skies, Zeus, was set up, and the heathens of the empire came to pay homage to it. So they set a statue of Zeus in our temple. That's what they did. Here's a second witness from the Jewish Encyclopedia. It says the same thing. The abomination of desolation, or the statue that was set up in our temple on the altar, was Zeus. Why is this important, brothers and sisters? We're going to tie it all together because I showed you guys earlier that Antiochus said he is Zeus. He is Zeus. He said he was Zeus in the flesh. So literally, since he could not be present in the temple for people to come and pay homage to him, he set up his quote unquote likeness, or who he said he was, in the form of Zeus in the temple, so that people would go and sacrifice and pay homage to that. And in essence, or by extension, they're really paying homage to Antiochus. He's really being worshipped. You guys see that? That's what he did. And Zeus is a remix of all these gods that were before him. Baal being one of the more prominent ones in the Bible, which is a god of rain and thunder, so forth and so on. That's what Zeus is. The same thing. Same thing. Right? Verse 56. And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law, which they found, they burnt them with fire. I always got to bring this out. What does this show you guys? What does this show you? They rent in pieces the books of the law, which they found. They burnt them with fire. There was always multiple copies of our records. The idea of an original manuscript is BS. It's a fake argument. We always had multiple copies, because if these were the only copies we had and these were burnt, we wouldn't have any. So there was always multiple copies. So the ones that they found in this particular place, they burned. But there were others that survived. And whosoever was found with any book of the testament, or if any committed to the law, the king's commandment was that they should put him to death. Excuse me, Slakia. Thus did they, by their authority unto the Israelites every month, to as many as were found in the cities. Now the 25th day of the month, they did sacrifice upon the idol altar, which was upon the altar of God, where they had Zeus, at which time, according to the commandment, they put to death certain women that had caused their children to be circumcised. So you had certain of our sisters that were valiant back then, that even with all this going on, the sisters were still keeping God's laws and circumcising their children. There's always, I always say this, there's always a righteous remnant of sisters. Like, not all sisters are bad. Like, some brothers be teaching like all the sisters are bad, all the sisters are off. The sisters ain't any more off than the brothers are. And some sisters are more mighty in the spirit in the face of adversity than some men. And we see this right here in the scriptures. And they hanged the infants about their necks and rifled their houses and slew them that had circumcised them. Howbeit, many in Israel were fully resolved and confirmed in themselves not to eat any unclean thing. Wherefore, they rather to die than they might not be defiled with meats, that they might not profane the holy covenant. So then they died, and there was a great wrath upon Israel. All right, so that's the end of chapter 1. I know it was a lot, brothers and sisters, but hopefully the PowerPoint was edifying to you, brothers and sisters. All right, let's now move into chapter 2 because there's a lot of reading to get through. This is going to be mostly reading now, right? Because this stuff is pretty much self-explanatory. First Maccabees chapter 2, verse 1. In those days arose Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Jorib from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin. And he had 5 sons: Johanan, called Caddis; Simeon, called Thasai; Judas, who was called Maccabeus; Eleazar, called Abiron; and Jonathan, whose surname was Aphis. So you guys could see that this whole surname thing, not only did Antiochus have surnames, but the Maccabees had surnames too. That was just a thing back then. Okay? This is known as your Hasmonean dynasty, right? Now, what you guys are going to find out, it goes all the way down to this guy right here by the name of Hyrcanus II. This guy did something which we're not going to get into today, but this guy did something where he's the one that forced a lot of Edomites to start keeping our laws. And that's how the Herods got in there. But we ain't going to get into that today. All right? We're not going to get into that today. All right. So now let's come over here. Okay, so some craziness there. All right. So we're going to pick it up at verse number 6. First Maccabees chapter 2, verse 6. And when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, woe is me. Wherefore was I born to see this misery of my people in the holy city and dwell there? When it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, and his sanctuary into the hand of strangers. Her temple is become as a man without glory. Her glorious vessels are carried away into captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets. Her young men with the sword of the enemy. Which nation hath not had a part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? All her ornaments are taken away. Of a free woman she has become a bond slave. And behold, our sanctuary, even our beauty and our glory, is laid waste, and the Gentiles have profaned it. That's what I was telling you guys earlier. The Gentiles got a hold of our temple, but at this point, they didn't destroy it. That's why when the Maccabees got back a hold of it, they just simply rededicated it in the manner that Solomon dedicated it when he first built the temple from the ground up. Verse 13. To what end, therefore, shall we live any longer? Then Mattathias and his sons rent their clothes and put on sackcloth and mourned. In the meanwhile, the king's officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came into the city of Modin to make them sacrifice. And when many of Israel came unto them, Mattathias also and his sons came together. And then answered the king's officers and said to Mattathias on this wise, thou art a ruler and an honorable and great man in the city, and strengthened with sons and brethren. Now therefore come thou first, and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done, yea, and the men of Judah also, and such as remain at Jerusalem. So shalt thou and thy house be in the number of the king's friends, and thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards. I want you guys to notice that. See, if you are a sinner like the white man, if you're evil like the white man, if you do abominable things like the white man, you could be his friend. I find it really interesting. You have a lot of Israelites that will tell you, oh, you know, I got white friends. I got this, I got that. Okay, have you told these white people that you're an Israelite? Have you told them that Christ is black? Because if you tell them the truth, they're not going to like you as much as you think they like you. They don't like you as much as you think they like you. They like you as long as they think you're in ignorance and you're in sin like them. That's it. Then you could be their friend. Then you could be a celebrity in Hollywood, right? I'm going to honor you in front of everybody. But I want you to go out there and tell your people to do evil, wicked stuff. That's what these rappers are doing, male and female. Put a bad message in the community, and I'll honor you in front of everybody. That spirit goes all the way back here. Verse 19, then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away, everyone from the religion of their fathers, and give consent to his commandments, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. God forbid that we should forsake the laws and the ordinances. We will not hearken to the king's words, to go from our religion either on the right hand or the left. Now when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar, which was at Modin, according to the king's commandment. Which thing, when Mattathias saw it, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled. Neither could he forbear to show his anger according to judgment, wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. The Maccabees was no joke. And the king's commissioner, who compelled men to sacrifice, he killed at that time, and the altar he pulled down. Thus dealt he zealously for the law of God, like Phinehas did unto Zambri, the son of Salmon. And Mattathias cried throughout the city with a loud voice, saying, whosoever is zealous of the law and maintain the covenant, let him follow me. This is the same thing, we guys, that we say when we go out on the highways and byways and teach. Follow us as we follow Christ. Whosoever is zealous of the Most High's laws. So he and his sons fled into the mountains and left all that they ever had in the city. How many of us would be ready to do this? Because the time is going to come where we're going to have to be pilgrims again. And we're going to have to do this. You're going to have to leave behind everything that you ever had. Who's ready to do this? Everybody's ready for the kingdom. You want to skip the tribulation and go right into the kingdom. That's not how it's going to go. Verse number 29. Then many that sought after justice and judgment went down into the wilderness to dwell there, both they and their children and their wives and their cattle, because afflictions increased sore upon them. Verse 31. Now, when it was told the king's servants and the host that was at Jerusalem in the city of David that certain men who had broken the king's commandment were gone down into secret places in the wilderness, they pursued after them a great number, and having overtaken them, they camped against them and made war with them on the Sabbath day, because the white men studied them and realized, you know what, we're going to go to war with them on the Sabbath, right? And they said unto them, let that which ye have done hitherto suffice. Come forth and do according to the commandment of the king, and ye shall live. But they said, we will not come forth, neither will we do the king's commandment to profane the Sabbath. So then they gave them the battle with all speed. Howbeit they answered them not, neither cast they any stone at them, nor stopped the places where they lay hid, but said, let us die all in our innocency. Heaven and earth will testify for us that ye put us to death wrongfully. So they rose up against them in battle on the Sabbath, and they slew them with their wives and children and their cattle, to the number of 1,000 people. Now when Mattathias and his friends understood hereof, they mourned for them right sore, and one of them said to another, if we all do as our brethren have done, and fight not for our lives and laws against the heathen, they will now quickly root us out the earth. At that time, therefore, they decreed, saying, whosoever shall come to make battle with us on the Sabbath day, we will fight against them. Neither will we neither will we die all as our brethren that were murdered in the secret places. Then came there unto them a company of Assyrians, who were mighty men of Israel, even all such as were voluntarily devoted to the Lord. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Assyrians before. Some scholars say the Assyrians would eventually be the group that your Pharisees would come from. That's what they say. Just throwing that out there. Okay. Verse number 43. Also, all they that fled for persecution joined themselves unto them and were a stay unto them. So they joined their forces and smote sinful men in their anger and wicked men in their wrath, but the rest fled to the heathen for succor. Then Mattathias and his friends went round about and pulled down the altars. And what children soever they found within the coast of Israel uncircumcised, those they circumcised valiantly. This is very important, brothers and sisters. The children that they found that were not circumcised, they circumcised. These children were also not circumcised on the 8th day. These children were circumcised later. Wherever they found them, whatever age they were, they circumcised them. What is this showing you? Obedience is better than sacrifice. So when people ask us all the time, well, should I get sacrificed? I'm doing the truth. I mean, should I get circumcised? I'm doing the truth. The answer is, of course, you should get circumcised. Of course. Even if it wasn't done on the 8th day, of course. Right? You should definitely want to do it because it's part of your custom. But if you're relying on the circumcision of your flesh to bring you salvation, that's where the problem comes in. Let's keep reading. They pursued also after the proud men, and the work prospered in their hand. So they removed the law out of the hand of the Gentiles and out of the hand of the kings, neither suffered they the sinner to triumph. Now when the time drew near Mattathias should die, he said unto his sons, now hath pride and rebuke gotten thee, and the time of destruction and the wrath of indignation. Now therefore, my sons, be zealous for the law, and give your lives for the covenant of your fathers. Call to remembrance what acts our fathers did in their time, so shall ye receive a great honor and an everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful in temptation? And it was imputed to him for righteousness. Joseph, in the time of his distress, kept the commandments and was made Lord of Egypt. Phinehas, our father, being zealous and fervent, obtained the covenant of an everlasting priesthood. Jesus, this is talking about Joshua, for fulfilling the word, was made a judge in Israel. Caleb, for bearing witness before the congregation, received the heritage of the land. David, for being merciful, possessed the throne of an everlasting kingdom. Elias, or Elijah, for being zealous and fervent for the law, was taken up into heaven. Ananias, Azariah, and Misael, aka the 3 Hebrew boys, by believing were saved out of the flame. Daniel, for his innocency, was delivered from the mouth of lions. And thus consider ye throughout all the ages that none that put their trust in him shall be overcome. Fear not the words of a sinful man, for his glory shall be dung and worms. Today he shall be lifted up, and tomorrow he shall not be found, because he is returned to his dust, and his thought is come to nothing. Wherefore, ye, my sons, be valiant and show yourselves men in the behalf of the law, for by it ye shall obtain glory. And behold, I know that your brother Simon is a man of counsel. Give ear unto him always, and he shall be a father unto you. And as for Judas Maccabeus, he hath been mighty and strong, even from his youth up. Let him be your captain, and fight the battle of the people. Take also unto you all those that observe the law, and avenge ye the wrong of your people. Recompense fully the heathen, and take heed to the commandments of the law. So he blessed them and was gathered to his fathers. And he died in the 146th year. And his sons buried him in the sepulchre of his fathers at Modin. And all Israel made a great lamentation for him. Let's move on to chapter number 3. Then his son Judas, called Maccabeus, rose up in his stead, and all his brethren helped him, and so did all they that held with his father, and they fought with cheerfulness in the battle of Israel. So he gat his people great honor, and put on a breastplate as a giant, and girt his warlike harness about him, and he made battles, protecting the host with his sword. In his acts he was like a lion in a lion's whelp, roaring for his prey. For he pursued the wicked and sought them out, and burnt up those that vexed his people. Wherefore the wicked shrunk for fear of him, and all the workers of iniquity were troubled, because salvation prospered in his hand. He grieved also many kings, and made Jacob glad with his acts, and his memorial is blessed forever. Moreover, he went throughout the cities of Judah, destroying the ungodly out of them, and turning away wrath from Israel. So that goes to show you too that somebody can die for sin to save everybody else. Because they say that a man can't die for somebody's sins. Well, that's what we're reading right here. He went throughout the city of Judah and destroyed the ungodly men, so that sin would be turned away from Israel. Bloodshed turns sin away from Israel. Understand that. Verse 9. So that he was renowned unto the uttermost part of the earth, and he received unto him such as were ready to perish. Then Apollonius gathered the Gentiles together, a great host out of Samaria, to fight against Israel. Which thing when Judas perceived, he went forth to meet him, and so he smote him and slew him. Many also fell down slain, but the rest fled. Wherefore Judas took their spoils, and Apollonius the sword also, and therewith he fought all his life long. Now when Seron, a prince of the army of Syria, heard that Judas had gathered unto him a multitude in the company of the faithful to go out with him to war, he said, I will get me a name and an honor in the kingdom, for I will go fight with Judas and them that are with him, who despise the king's commandment. So he made him ready to go up, and he went with him a mighty host of the ungodly to help him, and to be avenged of the children of Israel. And when he came near to going up to Beth Horon, Judas went forth to meet him with a small company, who, when they saw the host coming to meet them, said unto Judas, how shall we be able to, being so few, to fight against so great a multitude and so strong, seeing that we are ready to faint with fasting all day? Unto whom Judas answered, it is no hard matter for many to be shut up in the hands of a few, and with God of heaven it is all one, to deliver a great multitude or a small company. For the victory of battle standeth not in the multitude of hosts, but strength cometh from heaven. They come against us in much pride and iniquity to destroy us, and our wives and our children, and to spoil us. But we fight for our lives and our laws. Wherefore the Lord himself will overthrow them before our face. And as for you, be ye not afraid of them. Now as soon as he had left off speaking, he leapt suddenly upon them, and so Seron and his hosts were overthrown before him. And they pursued them from the going down of Beth Horon unto the plain, where were slain about 800 men of them, and the residue fled into the land of the Philistines. Then began the fear of Judas and his brethren, an exceeding great dread to fall upon the nations round about them, insomuch as his fame came unto the king, and all nations talked of the battles of Judas. Now when King Antiochus heard these things, he was full of indignation, wherefore he sent and gathered together all the forces of his realm, even a very strong army. He opened also his treasure, and gave his soldiers pay for a year, commanding them to be ready whensoever he should need them. Nevertheless, when he saw that the money of his treasures failed, and that the tributes in the country were small, because of the because of the dissension and the plague which he had brought upon the land, and taken away the laws which had been of old time, he feared that he should not be able to bear the charges any longer, nor to have such gifts to give so liberally as he did, for he had abounded above the kings that were before him. Wherefore, being greatly perplexed in his mind, he determined to go into Persia, there to take the tributes of the countries, and to gather much money. So he left Lysias, a nobleman, and one of the blood royal, to oversee the affairs of the king from the river Euphrates unto the borders of Egypt, and to bring his son Antiochus until he came again. Moreover, he delivered unto him half of his forces and elephants, and gave him charge of all things that he would have done, as also concerning them that dwelt in Judah and Jerusalem. To wit, that he should send an army against them to destroy and root out the strength of Israel and the remnant of Jerusalem, and to take away their memorial from that place. And that he should place strangers in all their quarters, and divide their land by lot. So the king took half the forces that remained, and departed from Antioch, his royal city, the 147th year, and having passed the river Euphrates, he went through the high countries. Then Lysias chose Ptolemy the son of Dorymenes, Nicanor, Georgius, mighty men of the king's friends. And with them they sent 40,000 footmen and 7,000 horsemen to go into the land of Judah and destroy it as the king had commanded. And so they went forth with all their power, and came and pitched by Emmaus in the plain country. And the merchants of the country, hearing of the fame of them, took silver and gold very much with servants, and came into the camp to buy the children of Israel for slaves. A power also of Syria and the land of the Philistines joined themselves unto them. Now when Judas and his brethren saw the miseries were multiplied, and that the forces did encamp themselves in their borders, For they knew how the king had given commandment to destroy the people and utterly abolish them. They said one to another, let us restore the decayed fortune of our people, and let us fight for our people and the sanctuary. Then was the congregation gathered together that they might be ready for battle, and that they might pray and ask mercy and compassion. Now Jerusalem lay void as a wilderness. Salakia, real quick, my apologies. Now Jerusalem lay void as a wilderness. There was none of her children that went in or out. The sanctuary also was trodden down, and the aliens kept the stronghold, and the heathen had their habitation in that place. And joy was taken from Jacob, and the pipe with the harp ceased. Wherefore the Israelites assembled themselves together and came to Maspha over against Jerusalem, for Maspha was a place where they prayed aforetime in Israel. Then they fasted that day and put on sackcloth and cast ashes upon their head and rent their clothes and laid open the book of the law where the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. They brought also the priest's garments and first fruits and tithes, and the Nazarites they stirred up who had accomplished their days. Then cried they with a loud voice toward heaven, saying, we shall do with these, and what shall we do with these? And whither shall we carry them away? For thy sanctuary is trodden down and profaned, and thy priests are in heaviness and brought low. And lo, the heathen are assembled together against us to destroy us. What things they imagine against us, thou knowest. How shall we be able to stand against them, except thou, O God, be our help? Then sounded they the trumpets and cried with a loud voice. And after this, Judah ordained captains over the people, even captains over thousands, and captains over hundreds, and captains over 50s, and over 10s. But as for such as were building houses, or had betrothed wives, or were planting vineyards, or were fearful, those he commanded that they should return every man to his own house according to the law. So the camp removed and pitched upon the south side of Emmaus. And Judah said, arm yourselves and be valiant men, and see that ye be in readiness against the morning, that ye may fight with these nations that are assembled together against us to destroy us in our sanctuary. For it is better for us to die in battle than to behold the calamities of our people in our sanctuary. Nevertheless, as the will of God is in heaven, so let him do. All right, so we're going to move over to chapter number 4. Then took Georges 5,000 footmen and 1,000 of the best horsemen, and removed out of the camp by night, to the end that he might rush in upon the camp of the Jews and smite them suddenly. And the men of the fortress were his guides. Now when Judas heard thereof, he himself removed, and the valiant men with him, that he might smite the king's army, which was at Emmaus, while as yet the forces were dispersing from the camp. In the mean season came Georges by night into the camp of Judas, and when he found no man there, he sought them in the mountains, for he said, these fellows flee from us. But as soon as it was day, Judas showed himself in the plains with 3,000 men, who nevertheless had neither armor nor swords to their mind. And they saw the camp of the heathen, that it was strong and well harnessed, and compassed round about with horsemen, and these were expert of war. Then said Judas to the men that were with him, fear ye not this multitude, neither be afraid of their assault. Remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea, when Pharaoh pursued them with an army. Now therefore let us cry unto heaven, if peradventure the Lord will have mercy upon us, and remember the covenant of our fathers, and destroy this host before our face this day. So all the heathen may know that there is one that dwelleth and saveth Israel. Then the strangers lifted up their eyes and saw them coming over against them. Wherefore they went out of the camp to battle, but they that were with Judas sounded their trumpets. So they joined the battle, and the heathen, being discomfited, fled in the plain. Howbeit all the hindmost of them were slain with the sword, for they pursued them unto Gezerah, and unto the plains of Idumea, and Azotus, and Jamnia, so that there were slain of them upon 3,000 men. This done, Judas returned again with the host from pursuing them, and said to the people, Be not greedy of much spoil, insomuch as there is a battle before us. And Georgius and his hosts are here by us in the mountain. But stand ye now against our enemies and overcome them, and after this ye may boldly take your spoils. And Judas was yet speaking these words, there appeared a part of them looking out of the mountains. And when they perceived the Jews had put the host to flight, and were burning their tents, for the smoke that was seen declared what was done. When therefore they perceived these things, they were sore afraid, and seeing also the host of Judas in the plains ready to fight, they fled every one into the land of the strangers. Then Judas returned to spoil the tents, where they got much gold and silver, and blue and silk, and purple of the sea, and great riches. And this they went home. After this they went home, and sung a song of thanksgiving, and praised the Lord of heaven, because it is good, because his mercy endureth forever. Thus Israel had a great deliverance that day. Now all the strangers that had escaped came and told Lysias what had happened, who when he heard thereof was confounded and discouraged, because neither such things as he would were done unto Israel, nor such things as the king commanded him were come to pass. The next year, therefore, following Lysias, gathered together 70,000 choice men of foot, and 5,000 horsemen, that he might subdue them. So they came into Idumea and pitched their tents at Bethsura, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. And when they saw that the mighty army, he prayed and said, Blessed art thou, O Savior of Israel, who didst quell the violence of the mighty man by the hand of thy servant David, and gavest the host of strangers into the hands of Jonathan, the son of Saul, and his armor bearer. Shut up this army in the hands of thy people Israel, and let them be confounded in their power and their horsemen. Make them be of no courage, and cause the boldness of their strength to fall away, and let them quake at their destruction. Verse 33, Cast them down with the sword of them that love thee, and let all those that know thy name praise thee with thanksgiving. So they joined the battle, and there was slain of the host of Lysias about 5,000 men. Even before them were they slain. Now when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of Judas's soldiers, and how they were ready either to live or die valiantly, he went into Antiochus and gathered together a company of strangers, and having made his army greater than it was, he proposed to come again into Judea. Then said Judas unto his brethren, Behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. And that's what I was telling you guys earlier. They didn't have to build a sanctuary from the ground up because it wasn't destroyed. It was polluted. So when they got back a hold of the sanctuary, they wanted to clean the sanctuary up, and they would follow the blueprint that Solomon did and rededicate the temple again. Upon this, all the hosts, Slakia. Yeah, verse 37. Upon this, all the hosts assembled themselves together and went up into Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profaned, and the gates burned up, and the shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest, or in one of the mountains, yea, the priests' chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes, and made great lamentation, and cast ashes upon their head, and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew an alarm with the trumpets, and cried towards heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until they had cleansed the sanctuary. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the laws, who cleansed the sanctuary and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when as they had consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profaned, they thought it best to pull it down, lest there be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it, wherefore they pulled it down, and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place until there should come a prophet to show them what should be done with them. Then they took whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and all the things that were within the temple, and hallowed the courts. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings and of incense and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table, spread out the veils, and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now, on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month of Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals, just like Solomon did it. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God of heaven, who had given them good success, just like during the time of Solomon. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days and burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. Just one quick note, brothers and sisters. There's no such thing as an 8-branch menorah. It says they kept the feast 8 days. It does not say that the menorah has 8 branches. That's not in the Bible. If you have an 8-branch menorah, get rid of it. 57. Then they decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed, and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness amongst the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month of Caslu, with mirth and gladness. At that time also they built up Mount Zion with high walls and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down, as they had done before. And they set there a garrison to keep it, and fortified Bersura to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea. So that's the story of the Feast of Rededication and why we observe it. And as we went over at the beginning of the PowerPoint, our Lord and Savior Hamashiach Yahushai also observed the Feast of Dedication as well, because it is a great time in our history, and we do definitely honor the great and valiant acts of Judas and his brothers. All right. I do want to ask you guys one quick thing, because I've already been on for over 2 hours, so I'm about to cut this short momentarily. There's something that was missing in that story. And I'm not really contentious about it, but, you know, it's not there. A lot of people, and I've seen this since I've been in the truth, try to replace Christmas with Hanukkah, right? So you can't keep Christmas, so you turn Hanukkah into Christmas. Technically speaking, you guys didn't read about them exchanging gifts on Hanukkah. You didn't read about that. That's not in there. That's something that was added later, but that's not in the Bible. I'm not contentious about it, because we've had people in the camp that wanted to do it, sisters that really, really wanted to do it. If you want to give gifts to people on Hanukkah, nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it. It's not a sin. But what I want you guys to know, it's also not in the Bible. So it would just be a custom that people want to keep, a tradition that people want to keep. And all traditions are not bad. But there's no such thing in the Bible as, okay, we don't give gifts on Christmas, we give gifts on Hanukkah. That's not in the Bible. If you want to create it as a tradition, create it as a tradition, but tell your children the truth. Hanukkah is about the rededication of our temple, because the heathens had gotten control of our temple and they polluted our temple, and the Maccabees family stood up strong and the people stood with them, and they got it back. That's what it's about. Cut and dry. That simple. Hey, stop sharing my screen. Hey, Zahab, if you want to unmute, if you have anything that you want to say, now would definitely be a good time to say it.
Nah, you're absolutely right because I was just telling my son about what Hanukkah represents, right? The dedication of the temple, and he asked me, "What about gifts?" I said, "You could get a gift, yes, but I want you to understand the original meaning of what Hanukkah is, right?" And that's very important what you said. It's nothing forbidding it, but just understand it's not originally in the original story in our history, so I agree with that, King. Just wanted to bring that out.
Calling all praises. All right, guys. For those of y'all that was here from the beginning, mainly I'm talking about y'all. I know some people came in later. When I went over chapter 1, I went over a lot. If what I said made sense, I know it was a lot, but if what I said made sense, you guys will know. Always ask this every class. Put 1 in the chat. If it made sense, if the history was concise, I tried to do it in a way where I didn't lose anybody, but maybe I did. If it made sense, put 1 in the chat. Let me know the history made sense. You guys see the transition from the dark-skinned Japhites to the white Edomites, the red Edomites, really, I should say, taking over.
Hey, the real revelation to me is when you brought out the fact that Antiochus said that he was Zeus, and then you went into different books to show the abomination of desolation, because some people think the abomination of desolation is different things, but you backed up to show that statue, that abominable statue of Zeus, which we all know that's Satan, right? And being put in the temple, that is the abomination of desolation. So, Khan, to me, that was the revelation for me.
Yeah, it was almost like a form of worshiping him. You know what I'm saying? Which goes into what it says in Thessalonians, that he shall sit in the temple of God as God. What it says in the book of Thessalonians. You guys know what I'm talking about, right?
Right,
That's that
proclaiming
spirit of
himself to
Esau.
be God. Yep.
Yeah, portray himself to be God. That's the spirit of Esau, always has been, right?
So now, real quick, so what if the temple is being rebuilt? Because so-called Israelis, they flushing out the Palestinians, right? So what if the Pope rebuild the temple and want to sit in the temple? Is that history being repeated all over again? Because remember, the temple was destroyed, and we're waiting for the third. They trying to rebuild the temple for the third time, right? So could that be also perceived as prophecy?
They're able to fulfill it, but I don't know if they're going to be able to fulfill it. But if they are able to fulfill it, there'll be something there where you'll be overtly or covertly worshiping them. They might have a statue in there. They might, the Pope might go sit there himself, right? Who
Right.
knows? But one way or another, you're going to be worshiping them in one way or another because they want to be worshipped. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. All right. Well, brothers and sisters, it's getting late for me. I have to go to work in the morning, unfortunately. So I'm about to cut it short. I appreciate those of you guys that came through. And I'm glad that the lesson was edifying for those of you guys that actually came through. And we will be back here this upcoming Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for our weekly Sabbath class. And of course, on Sunday, we'll be of course, we'll be doing the academy. Somebody asked, so you aren't supposed to use the menorah? Yeah, you are supposed to use the menorah. Menorah is a good thing. What I was saying was you gotta buy a 7-branch menorah. The 8-branch menorah is not real. The menorah that the Most High told Moses to build in the dimensions was a 7-branch menorah, not an 8-branch menorah. Because Hanukkah or dedication was kept 8 days, Esau, the so-called white man, has created this thing that this menorah that has 8 branches. I'm saying you really shouldn't have that one. Try to get the original one that has 7 branches, right? That's what I'm saying. Well, the way of truth, you say the Most High never sanctioned dedication. So this is what I would say to you, brother, with all due respect. Who guided the Maccabees to win those battles? Wasn't it God? God was with them all the way through that. But the last part, when they actually cleanse the temple out, God is not with that, right? You guys don't be making no sense sometimes. It's just ridiculous, man. It's just ridiculous. Hey, bro, you don't have to observe it if you don't want to, but it is a part of our history, whether you want to observe it or not. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. All right, it's your brother, Priest Daniel. I represent Lions of Israel, Maccabees TV. I appreciate you guys watching. And if you haven't hit the like button, make sure you guys hit the like button. Make sure you guys subscribe. And like I said, we will be back here Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, if it be the Most High's will. Shalom.